Morning guys, what's happening? Hope you're all doing well, staying crafty, working on your channels because I have no more time to explain to people why I don't really respect people who don't make an effort to make anything original. I mean, in the age of YouTube, with all the videos I've seen, there's people out there that have great talent, but I see them posting videos of cartoons and video games. Just kids with YouTube channels, they're not making anything. So I just say, yeah, just work harder. You know, I mean, if you want to get noticed, get respect. Anyway, I just wanted to share a little video that this really struck a chord. You know, I think that this needs to be addressed, the loneliness epidemic. And I'm just going to share the link down at the bottom because I only have a few minutes to watch this because I have actually things to do today. So let's get right into it. This is the Loneliness Epidemic, How We Became the Loneliest Generation by Cold Fusion. Stupid commercials. I remember when YouTube didn't have any commercials. Okay, here we go. Let's start.
To another episode of Cold Fusion. He held his phone close, eyes searching for privacy. The man scarcely noticed the subway riders around him, or the 90-year-old artist sketching his hunched frame from across the train. In the 7 decades since Alex Katz first drew the outlines of commuters on New York City's early morning trains, the chattering riders and newspapers had all but gone.
That's good.
In their places were people who rode alone, together. The light in their
people,
eyes
they can
reflecting
do this.
the glow of their smartphone.
They can draw.
That was a quote from the Dallas Morning News.
on
This short
your hands.
imagery is something that we see and all understand, but never really think deeply about. Why does it seem like less people are talking to each other in public? Why do we collectively prefer the dim glow of a smartphone screen? Do you remember your childhood neighborhood? Chances are, you probably felt like it was one big family. Everybody knew each other, celebrated together, and would offer help when needed. But in recent decades, this seems like it's no longer the case. People seem to keep to themselves more, and as a side effect, people are more lonely today than ever before. The number of men without any close friends has increased 5 times since 1990, and 10 times for women, though the total percentage of men feeling lonely is higher. On top of this, 3/4 of Gen Z report feeling lonely. Why have we drifted from each other? What is going on here?
Really?
The trend started before the pandemic and even before smartphones, so it has to be something structural within society. But what? I've been working on this episode for many months. It's an exploration of the loneliness epidemic. In this episode, we'll see the definitions of loneliness, its origins, its causes, and who's most affected. But this episode...
Scroll ahead. Okay, 4 minutes.
The pandemic poured fuel on a fire that was already burning.
Dr. Vivek
So
Murthy,
this
the
is now
U.S.
4
Surgeon
minutes,
General,
10
says
seconds,
loneliness is an epidemic.
I don't have time to get through the whole video.
The focus of an 80-page advisory he is releasing today.
For the sake of
We're
the
used to thinking about
YouTube
smoking and
algorithm, I gotta
obesity
try
as
to make
clear public
my
health
videos
concerns.
short.
So you're saying loneliness is comparable
Yeah.
to smoking in terms of the detriment to your health?
Yeah, in
Social
terms of the
fabric,
risk that
yeah.
it poses.
I remember when the age of the
The cure, Dr. Murthy says,
smartphone
is not only
first came out in
personal change,
2011
but societal
or
change as
2012.
well.
You're talking about changing
And even then,
the
Facebook,
social
it ruined
fabric. That's
our social
been decades in the making.
interactions.
It's been decades in the making.
I just wanted to find people to jam with
Loneliness is
offline.
not a new thing. It's
And
been
people are
around
doing
for as
this
long
all
as
day.
humans have. Today's loneliness seems like a simple cause and effect. As society became more complex, with industrialization, urbanization,
Oh yeah, they
and
show the
faster
iPhone
pace of
14.
life, people became lonely.
And that guy
It's not
right on the
that
couch,
straightforward.
that's
Something major happened in the
I can relate.
1960s and 70s that became the bedrock
Okay.
for the Loneliness Epidemic Declaration
Yeah.
in 2017. In Western nations, it was the social movements of the 1960s and 70s that seemed to
well,
accelerate
this guy really
phenomenon.
went far back.
A 2023
1960s.
QC research piece on loneliness by Alan Greenblatt would mention that, quote, the mass social movements of the 1960s helped shift people's attention from local concerns to more national issues, end quote. In other words, local communities mattered less, and it was all about changing the national status quo. According to Allen, this eventually resulted in
Decreased
a,
number
quote,
of social
decreased
gatherings.
number of social gatherings and eroded organizational participation, end quote.
Yeah.
For a commentary
The
on the cultural mood of the
1960s,
time,
they were a
at least
special
in the
time.
UK, you can look no
I
further
wasn't there,
than the Beatles.
but I've
According
seen
to
the
Paul
footage.
McCartney, the 1966 Beatles song,
Yeah,
Eleanor
music
Rigby,
was better
a
too.
broad commentary on the social changes of the 1960s happening at the time.
Special moment in
You can see
time,
it
which
in the
I'll
lyrics.
probably never
Quote,
experience.
all the
We're
lonely
at the
people,
opposite end.
where do they all come from? All the lonely
All the
people,
lonely people.
where do they
Oh
belong?
God, this
All
happened.
the
They
lonely
wrote this
people.
in the 1960s.
In the 1970s,
The Beatles,
things
they-
only got worse. This period
they,
would be famously known
anticipated
as the Me
something.
Decade. Why? Because a form
wonder
of
how
hyper-individualism began to express
much
itself
that they
within
would've
society.
Realized
As Val
that
Levin articulates in The Fractured Republic, the 1970s
that the changes
saw
with
high inflation,
society
high
and
crime,
technology.
an explosion of single mothers, and the
Mother and her
eroding of
baby.
family structures. Why collectively care
That's-
about changing the world, or even the local community,
Yeah,
when
honestly,
everyone has their own
I
problems to
feel
deal
like
with? The
okay.
70s saw tensions
Wait.
between different sects of society grow. Divorce rates would more than double between 1960 and 1980. Society was rapidly changing, and it caused a great upheaval. From around this time, society lost its cohesive glue. People would break out from the crushing conformity and turned inwards towards the satisfaction of individual wants and needs.
it's like
People
film
moved
school.
away from tradition and took their own paths
A lot
in
of people, they like to drink
Of course,
and
this resulted in
experimentation.
more freedom of expression and less repression. But Levin states that the price we paid for this new freedom has been high. Quote, "We have let loose a scourge of loneliness and isolation that we are still afraid to acknowledge as the distinct social dysfunction of our age of individualism." End quote. In other words, loneliness has thrived and evolved from our increasing individualism. Filmmaker David Hoffman speaks to Rushworth Kidder, a man born in 1944. His historically massive generation, called the baby boomers, would come to maturity in the 1960s and 70s. He describes his lived observations of witnessing the dissolving of society.
We're made for each other. There is a sense in which society matters because we're part of it and we need to participate in it. It's not going to work all by itself. And what happened in my generation, it seems, again and again, is people coming up to that realization and then just sort of something turning off. And off they drift off into sort of separate orbits,
worlds.
flying around as kind of unattached asteroids out there. There needs to be, it seems to me, if society is going to hold together, that sense of social cohesion in which each of us, as part of the community, says, I've got a responsibility to this. It's not a formal responsibility. It's not law. It's just that I care about this society and I'm part of this.
Yeah, and
Increasingly
I gotta tell you
concerned that
something
whatever the
in a
gravity
minute.
is that
Just
holds the
wait.
asteroid in orbit is just
I'll listen.
beginning to dissolve. And these people
Finish.
again and again are just sort of out there wandering. We never ever in the history of the world experienced anything like the baby boom that followed World War II, and we will never experience it again. This was that sort of one-time
Did
phenomenon.
veterans
And what we
die
see
for
in
this
the 60s may be as
kind of society?
simply
I don't think
explained
so.
as saying
Is that what
that's
they
the
fought and
maturity
died for?
of that tremendous crush of population, which
Broken
finally
society.
didn't have the elbow room, and finally needed to break out and say, I'm me.
This is all to say that the generations following the boomers grew up with strong individualism already embedded in society. Individualism came to prominence in the 1960s and 70s and never really left. There were, of course, periods where this did improve, but since the 2000s, social interaction has taken a nosedive.
Commercials. Okay. So it's taking a nose. Yeah. I was just reading the comments. I'm just gonna stop the video right there. That's around 9 minutes. Okay. So well, let's see. First of all, I'm gonna share the link down the bottom before I get into it. I just need a moment to properly collect my thoughts.
Loneliness is a disease of the spirit.
So,
People who have it think
so
that
in
no one
the-
cares about them.
they're talking about, in a nutshell, how
Just the opposite. They make
individualism
themselves lonely. They're so busy looking out for number
social
one,
media
they don't have
has
room.
created like a wedge that nowadays
Here's the paradox,
people
sir,
are
because if they did get together, they
resorting
wouldn't need
to
one.
doing
Isn't that
this
zen-like?
rather than just
Generation
picking up
X
the
and the
phone
millennials settled
and
into
talking
a
to people.
hyper-individualistic world And by
that's only been around
2007,
for a
Gina
decade.
Gustafson
And
from Uppsala University
oh yes,
would
we've
state that
grown
society
in
is
technology,
undergoing,
but
quote,
I think
the slow
that
but steady weakening of
you
shared
know,
collective identities,
technology
norms,
has
and culture,
evolved
and the
like
concomitant
past
rise of the ideal of the independent
where
individual, end quote.
we
Broadly speaking, my generation, millennials,
we didn't
and Generation X were
anticipate
the most
the leap
individualistic
forward.
generations of all.
I guess
That
a lot of
is,
people, I
until
think that
Generation
they,
Z.
there's-
You guys
there
got
is a
the shortest end of the
misuse.
stick.
They do
You came of age during the explosion
have a
of the
responsibility
most individualistic
to get out there
tool known to
to
man,
talk to
during
real
curated
people.
algorithms
Most people,
tailored
they
to the
don't want to
desires
bother
of
to
the
do that.
individual.
And
In other words,
I think the loneliness
social media.
epidemic, a large
High
part of
schools
that
and
is due to
universities are filled with people physically sharing the same
the
space, but
person,
with every idle minute,
I guess
a
they,
phone is
they
pulled
just do
out.
what's
This is something that
easiest.
wasn't even the case 15 years ago.
It's the easiest thing to
Of
do.
course,
They just want to stay
technology
home.
isn't inherently
And,
a bad thing. It is a tool.
the easiest
It can
thing to
improve
do
our
rather
lives.
than
But
pick
if
up
we
a
strip
phone
away
and
the benefits of
deal
convenient
with
connection,
somebody,
what are
it's
we
just
left
a
with? A screen that
text,
separates us from the real
or
world
just send an
and the people
emoji
around us.
out of,
A
I
device
guess,
that consumes our
laziness.
attention and time. A platform that keeps us
But yeah, the
entertained
fact
but
remains is
separated.
that yeah, we're
Because
divided.
somehow, even with all of our unprecedented
The society that we
technology,
live in,
no one has yet solved
there's a thing
what I'll
called
call
cancel
the
culture,
other gamer's
okay?
dilemma. That when you
Where,
shut your computer
you know, you could be
screen,
dropped
power
just
down your
like
phone, take off
like
the
that.
VR
You know,
headset,
people can
there you
text
are,
you like your boss and say,
alone.
"Oh, you're fired,"
in your room.
or people
Now,
that
this is
you
all
try to
known and
reach
common
out to,
knowledge,
they
but
won't
what's
call
surprising
you,
is what's next.
but
There's
they'll
a hidden
text. That
force
is my
that's causing
biggest
people
pet
to feel
peeve.
lonely,
That's
and
happened
it's
to me
hardly ever talked about.
on many occasions. People that will bother.
We are about to become a
I need a cup of
society
tea.
by the turn of the
People
century.
don't
there will
bother
be
to
8
take the
times as
time
many
to
people over the
communicate.
age of 60 and half as
So,
many kids under the age of 5.
I think maybe
Is
what
this
it
the
is a
world we
large part
want?
of
Do
laziness.
we want
I
a
think
lack of kids?
though,
Do we want a
that
lack of ability to create households? The
there's
happiest,
big companies
most
and groups like,
prosperous, most
I'm not gonna
purposeful
say,
people in
like,
America are
you know,
middle-class
one or
families.
two
And we have made
companies
a
are to blame.
concerted
It's really
decision
it's
to punch it in the gut and make it harder
it's up
for
to
that
the
type of family
responsibility of the
formation. We're going to
individual.
lose
I mean,
prosperity,
it's
and we're going to
like
lose
technology.
purpose.
It's always going to exist.
Most
Social
people
media
don't
is
realize
always
this,
going
but
to
societal cohesion
exist.
and economics
You know, we
are
have to
very
live
closely interlinked.
in
A
this
healthy
world
growing economy
that
means that the standards of living go up.
you know, I mean,
Jobs
it
are stable,
has
wages are increasing, and
created a
inflation
divide.
is low.
I mean, hopefully
can
people
afford
will
more, feel happy,
wake up and
and are
finally
more likely
realize
to build
one day
relationships.
that
A
you know,
faltering
social
economy
media is
is
like
exactly the opposite.
they'll
Today, due to rising
categorize it
inflation,
as
stagnant
smoking
wages,
or
and debt
drinking.
burdens,
You know, you do
people
too
have
much
to work
of it,
longer
it's not
and
good for
harder.
you.
Sometimes we
And,
may even need to juggle multiple jobs just to keep up.
I
It's a
believe
frustrating
so. I
state
believe
of
that's the
affairs.
case.
But if you're wondering why the world is like this, I
people,
fully
they really
explained
need
it
to
in
get
my
out
episode,
more
How the
and,
2008 Crisis Still Affects
you know,
You.
have real
In that episode, I
connections
described
with
how the true
real
economy died in
people, have real
2008, and it's
friendships.
been on life support ever since.
I know that's going to
Because of
trigger some
horrendous
people,
government
but
policies
that's just
and
the truth
reckless
of it.
behavior
I
from the
mean,
financial sector,
I see
people
people
have
on
been
social
struggling to make
media
ends
all the
meet.
time.
Slowly
They
at
think,
first,
oh yeah,
only
you
to
know,
be
they put
accelerated
their
by the
value
pandemic.
into their
Today, it's a constant fight to
profiles
stay
and
in
their
the
channels,
disappearing middle
but
class.
what do
All
they
across
have?
the world, an increasing
Honestly.
number of people are taking up second
What
jobs.
do they have?
Most
I
young
mean,
people are working,
kid
but still
comes up
can't
to me and
afford
says,
to
"Yeah,
rent
you should
or buy a home.
follow
It's getting too
Hinduism."
expensive to go out. In all of that,
Okay, who are
where
you,
is the
and
time,
why
money,
haven't you
or
created
energy for
anything
socializing?
real?
This impacts how lonely
You
we
know,
feel.
I could even show you his channel.
And it's not just some
Or
pie in
just
the
share the
sky
link at the
idea.
bottom, you
To
know,
give
so
you a
you can go
data-driven
talk to that
picture
guy.
of how
But,
influential economics can be to
there's a
feelings
lot of people out there that
loneliness.
are,
A study with
not
400,000
getting
UK
it.
participants found something shocking. If you
they
measure
don't
the amount of
understand
loneliness
the fact
felt in the
that,
aftermath of the death of a spouse
since the
and
pandemic,
divided that
you
by
know,
4,
we've
that's the same amount
for the
of
most part,
loneliness
we've
as
been
going from earning over
under
100,000
lockdown. We've been
pounds
stuck
down to under
indoors.
18,000.
I've lost my job.
The
Unfortunately,
researchers
I was
also
one of those
stated
guys that did not
losing
take
this
the
much income is half
Kool-Aid.
the
Oh yeah, I
loneliness
tried
felt from
talking
divorce.
about it
The
on
measures of loneliness were
social
quantified
media,
by a range of survey
and
questions.
I've been, I guess,
It's not directly intuitive,
canceled for it.
but being in a
And that's
desperate
the way the
economic
society
situation
works
directly
these
increases
days.
feelings of
If you
loneliness.
don't like a person, they could just shut them off.
So now that we know some of the causes, in all
And it's
society,
kinda scary to
who
think
is
about.
the most affected?
So you know what?
Statistically,
Not
it is
everybody's
not
gonna have the
elderly
same
anymore.
beliefs.
Now, it's the young.
But if you see somebody that's like working, you know, is down on their luck, you should not judge too much. I mean, I've had people that came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, you know, you should go to this church," and I mean, like, I have my own personal thoughts about that. It was a nice, kind gesture, I mean, I might actually go, but I mean, it's mostly these types of immigrants and other people that go there on a weekly basis. It's not really a place that. I mean, I wanted to try to find my people. You know, I wanted to find creators and do things in real life. I mean, we are only young once, but you know, time is ticking. At what point am I going to be able to find good people?